back on the Brooklands again. The shinker-stretcher is all apart because I've got the parts for that painted. I need to bring the main bit of the frame in. I painted that out in the woodshed. And I still haven't done anything on the actual guards, but I have been looking at these front bump stops. They need to be quite close to the axle because of the problem with clearance under the dynamo. It's only about 1 inch of clearance. So I need to make sure my bump stops stop it before it gets there. So what I've ended up doing is, when I had these springs remade, I didn't have the original U-bolts, which are sort of cast square corner things, I believe. And the spring makers gave me these U-bolts, which are the same size, but the corners are a bit different. They're a little bit rounded off. So I ended up making these little plates to sit on top of the springs to give the U-bolt something to actually bolt down hard to, with chamfered corners, so that it would actually allow that sort of corner radius. There had to be a hole drilled in the middle of them for the bolt that holds the spring together. So instead of putting the bump stop here, I really want it to be directly under the axle. That makes most sense and looks correct. So I need to drill the hole there somewhere, but I don't want it hitting this bolt. So what I ended up doing was machining up 2 new little plates which are thicker, and this is I think it's 3/8 thick steel, about 10mm steel. And all I did was cut it to the right width to fit the spring, and machine down the place where the U-bolts sit, so the U-bolts will fit in there, and machined out a little pocket in the bottom for that nut, and that gives me a nice flat surface for the bump stop to work against. I did have to set up the 4-jaw chuck in the lathe to be able to bore those out. I don't have any suitable milling bits that would let me just plunge and do that, so I just had to ground up a little tool, had the 4-jaw on there. I need to repair my lathe because when I was machining the handles for the shinker-stretcher, I managed to shear off the pin in here, which goes to the carriage drive, and this is the little collar that the gears key to, and this sheared. I'm not even sure why, because I hadn't done anything. It just decided that it didn't want to work anymore. So I need to figure out, that's a 3mm hole, what to use for the pin. I think it needs to be fairly soft, so you don't use a roll pin, for example, because the whole point of that thing is to break if there's too much load. I don't know what they actually use. If it's a special thing, is it brass or aluminium? The one that came out of there was steel, but it seemed very soft. So I need to find out what I can use for that. Some suitable 3mm pin. So that should be easy enough to fix. And then I've had a good clean up somewhere around here. I did keep playing with the shinker-stretcher to see what happens if you really shrink and stretch the edges, and it does curve things. You can see that the metal has to curve because of the shape of it. So that was just on the shinker-stretcher, and that would have been that sort of radius to start with. So you can see how it changes the shape. So I wasn't expecting the weather to be quite so good today, so I didn't get outside to do the grinding. Just grind the tops of the welds before I try and planish them all out, especially the places where I blew holes and had to fill it. So I need to grind those flat, and then I can hammer those up and start doing the wired edge. Other than that, I had a good clean up because it was getting really messy. Today is windy and a bit rainy, but I was able to go outside, and using my little air sander, some little flap discs. I was able to knock back the welds on the guards, and now I have started hammering them smooth, hammer and file basically. I just use this file to see where all the highs and lows are. It's not perfect yet, it's getting better. It's probably getting close to just needing a skimmer filler sort of state. Hammering this has made the sides come out a bit, but I think by the time I do the wired edge, that'll all come right. And even if it sticks out a bit, you can push it back in. So that's one edge done, and I think that's taken me an hour to do one side. So I'll keep going with the rest. It's quite tiring work, but my little T-stake here works really well. I'll sort of put it on that and hammer over that. The shinker-stretcher parts have been painted. Here's the stand. I'll leave that paint for a few days to dry because it's proper enamel type paint. It takes ages to dry. So that should be good. And I went through my box of hose stuff, and because I never throw anything away, I had these little offcuts of hose, and they're basically exactly the right size to go over those legs. So I'll use those as sort of rubber feet. And I also fixed my lathe. I looked up what people suggested using, and there's various things, but I thought let's just start with the softest material, and I made a 3mm aluminium pin and used that to pin it back on. So that's all working now. Figure start with the softest. If it doesn't break, that's great. If it does, work up to something else, maybe brass. But apparently I did find somewhere where it said the MCO lathes did use aluminium shear pins. So that's what I've done there. I think I'll take a break for a bit and then come back and do the rest of the guards. That's the first guard, mostly smooth and with the edges trimmed. Remember, it's going to have 1/2 inch all the way around rolled over for the wiring, for the wired edge. You can see the edges are a little bit wobbly still, but once that wire's in there, it'll all stiffen up. I'm pleased with how that's come out. So now I just have to do it all over again. When I did the first edge, I was a bit haphazard with my hammering and my filing. When I did the second one, I tried to be a lot more consistent and actually start at one end and work my way along and get each piece perfect, or close to perfect, or as good as I could anyway, as I went along. So yeah, the welds came out really well. I don't think I'm going to need much filler at all, probably just high build primer. The shape isn't perfect. There are little wobbles and things in it, but again, handmade, and it's an old car, so I think it'll look fine with that sort of level of finish on it, rather than aiming for absolute perfection, which I'd never get to, and it would just annoy me. Wind's really picked up now. It's about 4:45, and I think I'm done for today on these front guards. I've got both of them hammered up and trimmed to get the right shape at the front. I sort of took a cardboard and tape pattern off one of those original guards that I've got, and then of course added the extra 1/2 inch or so for the wire. But I only needed to use the pattern on the first one. I was able to sort of stack the first one on top of the second one, put one inside the other, and just trace around it to get the shape of them exactly right and get the lengths of them exactly the same. But they've come up pretty well. The second one took me a lot less time. I think I'm just getting better at it, and I also worked out, because you don't have to hit it very hard, instead of holding the hammer out like this, I was actually able to hold the hammer right up here and tap like that, and that made it a lot easier and a lot less tiring, but it's still very tiring. And then I thought it was probably time to stop when I had a slight accident with my random orbit sander here, which is starting not to random orbit a little bit. I actually dropped it on my leg, and so it went through my trousers, and it's actually taken a big chunk out of me. You'd think, sander, how's that possible? It's because the pad is so worn out. The little sanding discs are bigger than the pad, and so that edge bit into me, a bit like a slitting disc, but that's okay. Yeah, I think they look pretty good. Obviously they'll get a little bit thinner once the edge is wiped round, so the sides won't be quite as fat. But when I do the rear guards, I am actually going to lift them higher, and what I will do is make the sides very slightly fatter, probably ½ an inch or so. And what that will do is help disguise the fact that the guards are higher by keeping the gap between the tyre and the bottom of the wide edge similar. It might be a little bit higher at the back, but I think that'll look fine. I did find a picture of a Brooklands online. I'm not sure if it was original or a replica or a special. It looked original, and I haven't been able to figure out which one it is, but it's got the big long swoopy guards like this one, and the front guards are way higher than the back. It just looks strange. Most of them seem to be the other way around, but I think those should look pretty good. I may end up needing to put a stay from the front corner of the guard down to here somewhere or across. You see that very often where there's these diagonal bracings. It's because the guards rattle around. And to make the stays, I'm going to be using my thick wall tube, where it goes through this mounting bracket. I will machine up probably from that high tensile steel, because I'll thread it at the bottom, so one stay will fit through in there and sort of bend up, and the other one comes off that little mounting thing down there. It's a bit easier to see on this side without the exhaust. So that'll come across, and it's a bit hard to see where it's gonna end up. So that'll come across, and to actually attach the guard, I'm going to use flat, probably 6mm thick flat bar that'll be welded onto the ends of these, and that's what will actually go inside the guard. It won't come through the side, it'll come out the bottom, so it'll come down, and then the tube will be welded to it, all blended in. It seems to be how they've done on some of the originals. I think they look okay. It's definitely looking more and more like a car. I have finished, apart from the springs, the shinker-stretcher, painted it all up and bolted it all together. Lots of moly grease on the little pivoting points. I've got the wrong sort of circlips there. They're actually inside circlips, but they work. They just need to hold those pedals in place so they don't fall off, and they're unlikely to with the spring and the rods holding them in place. Again, temporary springs until I get the proper ones, but all they're really doing is returning the pedal to the right position. And I have cut out a little blank piece of steel and can show how this works. And let's see. The little rubber hose pieces I put on the legs work really well at stabilizing it. and you can see one pass. Puts a pretty good curve into that. So this is working well, and just a little bit of a rant, kind of about shaping metal, but also about World War II Wellington bombers and AI, of all things. So one of the channels I follow is the Brooklands Members TV, because they often have interesting little films about some of the things at Brooklands and what went on there and people associated with there. And they had some shots of their Wellington bomber. And of course the Wellington is famous for being a geodetic design, where the frame is made out of a lattice work of duralumin strips, basically, all sort of riveted together to give the plane its strength. And I'm really interested to know how they actually designed and built the frame, the actual frame pieces themselves, because they're all made from strips of metal that must be curved and shaped to exactly the right sort of sizes and angles for it all to fit together. And I've been trying to find out how they did that, but there's no information that I can find so far. You get an awful lot of talk about, yeah, it's a geodetic design and it gives it strength and makes it resilient and all those kind of things, but nothing about, well, how did they actually shape all those pieces of metal? And this is where the sort of AI stuff comes into it. So over the last so many years, the internet has effectively been getting worse and worse and worse as more people use it, because there's an awful lot of information on there, but an awful lot of it is wrong, or people's opinions, or people just make stuff up. I barely interact with forums anymore these days, because I've found a lot of the time they're not worth the effort. Similar to some of the comments you see in YouTube videos. So I was trying to search and find information about this, and there is a World War II propaganda film made in period where they assemble a Wellington bomber in 24 hours. But they kind of cheat, because the panels are already made, so they don't show that bit. And like I say, I've been trying to find out how they did it, but I haven't found any information. But you find this information on forums, and a lot of it's just wrong. So there's one guy, this is from years ago, stating that the strength wasn't in the geodetic framework, the strength was in the skin of the plane, which is completely wrong, because the skin on that plane was fabric. So there was no strength in it. It was just there for aerodynamic reasons, I guess. But this is the problem with AI. So most people do not understand how AI works, especially LLMs, which is like your ChatGPT and your Microsoft Copilot and all those kind of things. Because I'm in software, I need to know how this stuff works, because it relates to my job, because these tools are becoming more available. And they are useful if you use them in the right way. And the problem is, most people don't, and they don't understand how they work. But basically, all they do is break what you ask it into tokens, sort of words, syllables, fractions of sentences, and return you what the most statistically likely next response is, or next token is, based on what input you give it. It doesn't create anything. It just finds things and puts them together in what it hopes are meaningful sentences. And it does look amazing, but if you really know how it works, you realize it isn't. And this is the problem. These models have to be trained, and they've all been trained on internet data. And most of it is wrong, or a lot of it is wrong. But it will pick up what is the most popular and amplify that, because statistically, if you ask particular questions, the answers you get, it'll give you the most popular answers, not necessarily the most correct. So this problem is actually getting worse, because nowadays, if you search information on the internet, everyone now will have come across AI generated content, where people are just trying to bulk out their web pages, or it's even coming to YouTube films now, where it's all AI generated content. And the problem is that's going to feed back into itself, and it's just going to be learning on its own output. And if you know anything about systems or certain electronics things or stuff like that, you know that is not necessarily a good thing. So I don't think AI is going to work exactly the way people seem to think it's going to work, mainly because they don't understand it. But you can see if you stretch and shrink this stuff enough, it does all sorts of weird things to the metal, because there's nowhere else for that metal in the middle to go. I've only shrunk the edges, so it makes it go all ripply. If I was then to hammer these down flat into themselves, this piece of metal would be smaller than when I started. But it shows the machine is working, which is good. As for how they did the Wellington bomber, I don't know. It'll be the same way that they did airships. But I think the way I would do it is they must have been using some sort of shrinking, stretching machine similar to that. I would probably, if I was building a car using that method, say, I would probably build some kind of wooden buck that gives me the form I need. And then I would draw on it the lines where the different strips of metal need to go, and I would form them to that. I suspect they must have done it somehow like that. I'm not sure. If anybody knows, let me know. There must be a book or something somewhere around that explains it. But yeah, if you look at the actual construction of that plane, sure, they could assemble the aircraft pretty quickly, but I bet it took a lot of time and effort to actually make the panels, because there are so many pieces. I think the AI told me there were 1,650, which seems way too low. I'm sure there would have been more than that. But yeah, bit of a rant, but yeah, I'm pleased with how this has come out. It works really well. Now I just need to find somewhere to actually put it so I don't keep tripping over it. Probably going to have a slowish day today. I probably won't do the wire edged guards just because my hands are so sore from all the hammering yesterday, so I'm having a bit of a break. But I'm looking at the bonnet and the bonnet hinges, and a friend of mine did send me pictures of the little jig I had, but I've got all the pictures anyway. So these are all my photos from a blog I used to have that got lost, unfortunately, but all the pictures were on there. But this basically shows how I make these little bonnet hinges. So this is the shape, and this is my little mock-up of what a bonnet actually looks like. And you can see it's just a simple fold at the top, and these hinges simply slide together like that. So there's no fasteners needed, it all just holds together. And the side hinge is a lot more complicated. It's basically formed from the panels. You can sort of see how that works. You have to cut out all these little fingers, you have to do this sort of joggle in it so that it sits flush when it's closed. It takes a little bit of measuring and experimentation to get it right so that this gap is nice and tight. And the most painful bit, again, really hard on the hands, is cutting out all these little fingers. But once you've done that, it's not so bad. The hardest part I find is getting this little line very straight. But that's how you do the side part of the hinge. So you can see as that goes up, that folds back on itself. So that's how I was taught to do it by Joss, my mentor. And this was the little jig I came up with to help me bend these hinges. And you can sort of see how it works. You start with a little blank of metal and you put a 90-degree fold on it, and there's a few little pieces of square bar, and I used some angle iron, I think, at some point to help fold this over. Angle iron and little pieces of flat bar to get the gaps right. So I have all the pictures here showing how I did it. So I should be able to recreate it. And I did just order some 5/16 brass rod for the central hinge and 3/16 for the side hinges, and I'll do those out of brass. And then the strips, I either need to get more galvanized steel like this, or else stainless steel. I do have some stainless steel rod, but I don't think you want to use stainless steel rod with stainless steel hinges. That was the notification that my brass order just went through, because it would gall up. So I've ordered the brass rod. Also, I think I mentioned in a film a couple back that the bonnet hinges were offset. That was only on the racing Brooklands bodies, not the touring cars like mine is. Mine's more of a touring car, and the reason for it was to make it easier to get the spark plugs in and out when you're racing, because you don't have something directly above them. I guess you can easily get down onto them and pull them out. But I'm not sure what I'll do. I'll probably do it straight because it's easier and more correct. But yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm pretty sure I have a video up already from when I did this on my Austin 7, how I did making the side bonnet hinge. That would have been from a while ago. These pictures are from 2015, so 10 years ago now. But no, I'm glad I've still got all those pictures. I knew I had them somewhere. I've got thousands and thousands of pictures going back to 2002 by the looks of it. So those are all still there. Yeah, I'll see what bits and pieces I've got and make up another one of these little jigs. These are the little plates I've taken out from the top of the spring, with their little curved sides. They just cleared the U-bolts, and I've put in place my new flat plates. I didn't have to take the U-bolts off. I just needed to loosen them a bit, and I was able to slide out these original plates and put in the new ones. And you can see, once I'm able to actually drill that hole for the bump stop, that gives me a nice flat surface for the bump stop, and it'll hit the bump stop before it hits the dynamo, which is what we want. So like I say, very, very stiff front springs, but they can move.